They came just after dawn, dressed in black polos with HOA Enforcement Division embroidered across their chests and utility belts that screamed cosplay more than authority. The lead one knocked on my door like he thought he was kicking it down. I sipped my coffee from the front porch, boots up, watching them through the screen. 3 of them, one tall and barky, one nervous with a clipboard, and one that looked like he was ready to wet himself at the sound of a car backfiring. "Mr. Ryder," Barky yelled, "this is your final warning. Step outside and comply." I didn't move, just leaned forward and said calmly, "Comply with what exactly?" He stepped closer, puffing out his chest. "Failure to adhere to Meadow Hill HOA Code 14A. Unauthorized vehicle storage, fence height violation, and offensive signage. You've refused to respond to citations. You are now under HOA detainment protocol." That got a laugh out of me. "HOA? Detainment protocol?" Clipboard guy nodded. "Sir, we'll need to escort you down to the clubhouse for administrative holding." "You're going to arrest me," I said slowly, "over a fence." "And a bumper sticker," Barky added. "It says HOA is hell on asphalt." He actually read it off the paper like he was quoting a legal statute. I stood up. "Boys," I said, setting down my mug, "you've got about 10 seconds to walk back to that van, peel those fake patches off your shirts, and get off my land." "You're not in charge here," Barky snapped. "The board sent us. President Karen Gaines personally authorized this response. We are deputized to issue fines and perform soft detainment until a resolution hearing." He reached for his cuffs. Big mistake, because what he didn't know, what Karen never knew, was that I wasn't just some stubborn homeowner with a bad attitude. I'm a U.S. Marshal, 21 years. Fugitive recovery, witness protection, warrant apprehension. And these boys, they just walked into the wrong backyard with the wrong fake badges. Clipboard guy froze mid-step. His hand hovered near a nylon holster that, from what I could see, held nothing more dangerous than a flashlight. Barky, still puffed up like a barnyard rooster, took another step forward. "Sir, this is your final warning. Turn around. Place your hands behind your back and submit to HOA custody." I gave him one last chance. "You're impersonating law enforcement on private property," I said flatly. "That's a felony in the state of Texas, and since you've crossed state lines with that vehicle," I nodded at their black van with HOA tactical response, crudely vinyl wrapped on the side, "this just became a federal problem." Clipboard's mouth moved, but no words came out. The third guy, the silent one, looked down at his shoes like they might save him. Then Barky reached for the cuffs again, so I moved. Quick, controlled, just like I was trained. In one motion, I stepped forward, grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back and kicked his knees out. He hit the dirt like a sack of flour, face first, groaning as the wind shot out of his lungs. Clipboard screamed. The third guy stumbled backward and tripped over a potted plant. I stood over Barky, pulled my badge from my waistband, and held it. "Abid, U.S. Marshal James Ryder," I said, voice calm and cold. "You just attempted an unlawful arrest of a federal officer while impersonating police. Congratulations. You just escalated a code enforcement prank into a federal crime." Clipboard dropped his notepad. The third guy put his hands in the air like we were mid-raid. I reached down, rolled Barky onto his back, and zip-tied his wrists using the same set he'd tried to use on me. "Ironic, huh?" I muttered. 5 minutes later, I was on the phone. With the sheriff, 3 men posing as law enforcement tried to detain me. No legal authority. Fake vehicle, fake uniforms. One of them is zip-tied on my front lawn. "You want backup?" "I want them processed and charged." "On it, Karen." Gaines, president of the Meadow Hill HOA, showed up 30 minutes later in a golf cart like she was queen of the cul-de-sac. Blonde bob, aviators, clipboard, the whole look. She parked next to the fake van and barely glanced at the detained trio before storming up my driveway in wedges. "Mr. Ryder," she huffed, "this is an outrageous overreaction." I stepped down. "From my porch, your fake cops tried to arrest me. They are compliance officers, she said sharply, sanctioned by the Meadow Hill Board. You sent them to my house to detain me. You violated your fence height clause. I actually laughed. Lady, I don't even belong to your HOA. My property was zoned out 2 years before you broke ground across the street. I've never signed your covenants, never paid your dues. Never responded because I don't have to. Her lips thinned. That's where you're wrong, you're adjacent. And adjacent parcels are part of the buffer zone under the new compliance extension. We voted on it. I raised an eyebrow. Let me get this straight. You and your little HOA crew decided that because my property touches your subdivision, I'm now under your control. It's for community cohesion. No, I said, it's trespassing, extortion, and now impersonation of law enforcement. The sheriff's cruisers rolled up just as she opened her mouth to reply. 2 deputies, 1 investigator. They took one look at the fake van, the zip-tied barkie still moaning on my lawn, and walked straight up to Karen. You authorized this? The lead deputy asked. I advised them on neighborhood policy, Karen stammered. But I didn't order an arrest. They showed up in a marked vehicle, wearing enforcement gear, with zip ties. Her eyes flicked to me. He assaulted one of them, she barked. This is harassment. The investigator turned to me. Marshal Ryder? I showed my badge. They tried to arrest me on my own. Porch over a fence, while impersonating law enforcement. It's all on video, high definition, audio included. Karen's face turned pale. The deputy nodded. We'll take it from here. I folded my arms. Do that, I said, and call the U.S. Attorney's Office while you're at it. They're going to want to talk to Ms. Gaines here, especially once we start digging into HOA financials. Bye. The next morning, my phone was ringing non-stop. The story spread faster than wildfire. Local news ran with it first. Fake HOA enforcers try to arrest homeowner. Turns out he's a U.S. Marshal. Then regional media picked it up, with even better headlines. HOA tyranny backfires. President under criminal investigation. Karen Gaines' mugshot aired by noon, charged with conspiracy to impersonate law enforcement, criminal trespass, and reckless endangerment. No bond. She spent the night in a holding cell in the same county where she once bragged about cleaning up the neighborhood. She wasn't smiling now. The HOA scrambled. Half the board resigned within 48 hours. Lawyers for the subdivision developer started distancing themselves publicly, claiming Karen had acted independently and without board authorization. That was a lie. We found the emails, with a signed HOA resolution stating the board voted unanimously to approve active compliance patrols and detainment authority pending homeowner resistance. The budget, $27,000, was pulled directly from annual dues and funneled through a shell company called Community Order Solutions, LLC. You couldn't make this stuff up. I handed it off to the U.S. Attorney. Meanwhile, I sat down with Special Agent Warner from our local DOJ task force. He reviewed the footage from my porch cam, the fake arrest forms, even a printed compliance violation warrant that claimed to be enforceable under Unified Neighborhood Statutes. Warner looked at it and snorted. This sounds like something a YouTube sovereign citizen made up while half drunk. He was right, but the damage was very real. The 3 fake officers were facing felony charges. 2 of them had prior security licenses, now permanently revoked. The 3rd, he turned state's witness. According to him, Karen had been running a rogue HOA enforcement unit for 6 months. They'd patrolled surrounding homes, issued warnings, and seized items they deemed violations. Garden statues, banners, even a swing set one neighbor had built for their grandkids. No receipts, no inventory. Everything just disappeared. We later found most of it in a storage unit under Karen's husband's name. Boxes of patio umbrellas, decorative flags, and plastic. Pink flamingos all tagged with addresses and infractions. It was absurd, and it was criminal. 1 week later, I was summoned to a town hall meeting, this time by residents. not the HOA board. They didn't exist anymore. Dozens of homeowners packed into the rec center to thank me. Some brought baked goods. One woman gave me a drawing her daughter made of me standing on the porch with a caption, "Don't mess with Mr. Ryder." A few people cried, especially those who'd been bullied by the HOA for years. Fines for unmowed grass, warnings for wind chimes, threats of lien filings over holiday lights left up too long. Karen's reign had been long and mean, and now it was over. I testified at Karen's preliminary hearing the following Monday. She sat 2 tables down, in an orange jumpsuit, looking like she still hadn't figured out where it all went wrong. The judge read the charges, then asked if I had anything to add. I stood, looked straight at her. "You didn't come after me because I broke rules," I said. "You came after me because I didn't bow down, because I told you no." I held up the fake citation. "And you thought that a clipboard, a van, and a couple of idiots in polo shirts would make you powerful." The courtroom was silent. I lowered the paper. "But power doesn't come from patches. It comes from truth. And the truth is, you ran an extortion racket behind a white picket fence." Karen stared at the floor. The judge nodded. "Well said, Marshal Ryder. Motion to proceed to trial is granted." The day Karen's trial began, Meadow Hill was unrecognizable. The manicured silence was gone, replaced by cameras, protest signs, and neighbors suddenly remembering what it meant to talk to each other. People stood in driveways, comparing horror stories and shaking their heads in disbelief. The place that once prized uniformity now had porch flags, painted fences, and a few brand-new garden gnomes placed just out of spite. The neighborhood had snapped out of its trance. But the courthouse was still tense. Karen arrived in a blazer instead of the orange jumpsuit. Her lawyer, young, nervous, and clearly in over his head, argued that she'd acted out of an earnest desire to protect property values and community cohesion. I took the stand on day 2. The prosecution played the video from my porch, Karen's. Officers making their demand, me identifying myself, the takedown. Then came the exhibits, zip ties labeled HOA restraint only, printed detainment orders signed by Karen HOA, meeting notes that referenced soft intimidation tactics, emails between Karen and her board where she referred to my flagpole as an eyesore with dangerous political implications. I kept my testimony short. She didn't just cross the line, I told the jury. She drew her own and dared everyone to stop her. When the defense got their turn, they tried to spin it. Karen's lawyer claimed the officers never intended to perform a true arrest, that it was symbolic, and that I had escalated the situation. I glanced toward the jury. They didn't buy it. By the end of the week, the outcome was inevitable. Karen Gaines was found guilty on all counts: criminal impersonation, conspiracy to unlawfully detain, misappropriation of HOA funds, reckless endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 6. But it didn't end there. The fallout from her conviction sparked a civil lawsuit filed by over 40 homeowners who had suffered under her self-declared compliance reign. The HOA's insurance policy was drained dry. Karen's personal assets, including her $750,000 home, were seized to help cover settlement payments, and the HOA dissolved, gone, erased. The Meadow Hill neighborhood reformed under a voluntary civic association with zero enforcement power. They even elected a new neighborhood committee focused entirely on landscaping and block parties. I was invited to the first one. It was a barbecue. Simple, laid back. A dozen families in lawn chairs, kids running through sprinklers, burgers sizzling over a borrowed grill. Nobody cared about fence height or wind direction or whether my truck had dust on the bumper. Someone handed me a beer. The new committee head, a former Marine named Davis, clapped me on the shoulder. "Never seen people so relaxed," he said. "Guess it helps when the guy who brought down a fake police force lives 2 doors over." I smiled. Sometimes all it takes is one person who says, "That's enough." He nodded. Glad it was you. A few days later, I was back on my porch when a young couple I didn't recognize approached with a little boy holding a drawing. They said they had just moved in. They'd heard about the story, about the trial, about everything. We were hesitant. "To live here," the husband admitted, "but then we found out it was your house, the one where it all changed." I thanked them and took the picture from their son. It was a stick-figure version of me, holding a coffee mug, standing in front of a red flag that said, "Marshal, not a menace." I laughed harder than I had in months. Summer melted into fall, and Meadow Hill, once a model of militant suburban order, settled into something better. Quiet, neighborly, real. Gone were the lawn citations, the drone patrols, the clipboard patrols peering over fences at garden decor. Instead, you heard music from porches, kids' bikes left on sidewalks without threats of fines. A few homes even decorated early for Halloween, something that would have triggered a Karen-issued citation 2 years ago. I stayed out of the spotlight, didn't do interviews, didn't post online, but people still waved when they passed. They left small gifts at my door, a homemade pie, a carved wood sign that read, "No HOA, no problem." The real shift, though, happened one Sunday. I was walking down to the hardware store when I saw a group of neighbors repainting a fence that used to be the site of Karen's most infamous argument, a battle over color, shade, and whether taupe was too bold for suburban norms. Now they were painting it bright blue, no permission, no vote, just laughter and a roller brush. They saw me and offered a wave. "Want to help?" someone asked. I grinned. "Only if I get to break some rules." Months passed. I got a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They were pursuing similar investigations across the state now. HOAs abusing power, operating private compliance units, and crossing into full-blown criminal activity. My case had become a model. They even offered to name the operation. I declined, but they sent me a plaque anyway. Operation Front Porch. The case that turned the tide. I mounted it inside my garage, quietly, because this wasn't about legacy or attention. It was about holding the line. About not letting small tyrannies take root in the name of order. That's what being a marshal always meant to me, whether chasing fugitives or shutting down fake tactical units with zip ties and HOA patches. Karen Gaines never apologized. She was denied parole after her first hearing. Last I heard, she was writing a book from prison called "I Fought for Order." It wasn't selling. Her name became a cautionary tale, the kind whispered at neighborhood meetings and passed around as urban legend. But me? I kept things simple. One house, one fence, one porch, and one very firm rule carved into a wooden sign. Beside the flagpole, "This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. Trespass with a fake badge, and you will be detained by me." I never had another problem, because word got around. You don't mess with a man who doesn't blink, especially when that man wears a badge that still means something.